Hi everyone, Teddy Baldassarre here, and in this video, I am going to be answering some of your questions. I'm going to be doing another Q&A here. I asked on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, as well as on our YouTube community here, what are some of the questions you have for me? And I'm going to be going through those here today. So our first question here comes from Jumping Kangaroos. Look at that username. Why isn't Citizen viewed more highly amongst watch reviewers and enthusiasts? Is the pricing too accessible? Their EcoDrive solar-powered movements deserve more praise for their utility and accuracy, and their Chronomaster series is amazing. So generally speaking, I try to give appreciation for Citizen because I think they produce some great watches in many subsets of their broader range. Where I would call attention to is what you mentioned, the Chronomaster. Now that's more JDM, but the high accuracy quartz work that they're doing with some of their technology is insane, and I don't think enough people talk about it. But then you also have their ProMaster series, whether you're talking about the more air and aviation style watches like the Navihawk and Nighthawk, or you're looking at the ProMaster collection of dive watches, like people that I know that are professional in aviation field, like my cousin. His first proper watch was a Citizen. Ben, who's a member of our team and was formerly a commercial diver, was very adamant and would stress all the time about how Citizen is this phenomenal overlooked brand for so many people, considering if you go on a dive boat or with other divers, a common thing you will see on their wrist is a Citizen dive watch. Also things like the Toyosa in the 8 series, I think also deserve some appreciation and some notice as well. But to get to your question, why do people potentially not give them the respect they deserve? Citizen's guilty of producing what I would call mall watches. That is not a technical term by any means. What I'm really referring to here is usually like cheaper, gimmicky kind of designs that are just going to appeal to somebody that's not fully into watches. And the thing that hurts me the most here is typically they also sacrifice quality and design for just getting attention. There's a wide spectrum of quality when it comes to Citizen product, in my opinion, which for most collectors is not seen as a positive thing. You're also getting some of these really kind of, I find, cringe designs with their licensing products. Now, I try not to be a snob with these type of things, and I can look past this to a certain degree, even though I don't need a Ratatouille dial watch. You do understand why there might be some pushback here. Because of this, it's appealing to two different types of consumer. I think great brands and brands that usually are universally loved know what their core audience is. Citizen has multiple audiences. When they do their ProMaster collection and products of that sort, I think they're on the money, and I think are a great watch for the money. And then you have the other side of the brand where the watches don't appeal to the same demographic, and unfortunately, I think are falling victim to trying to appeal to people that aren't core audiences for watches. Now, they are still people with money in their pocket, so I cannot dismiss the concept in what Citizen is doing here, but I think this is why people have this general perspective of the brand. It's almost two brands in one. So depending on what you see and what you interact with, it can create a totally different view of the brand itself. Next question asks, how much does the success of the watch industry depend on the success of Rolex? Does the industry as a whole need Rolex to thrive in order to open up the world of watches to the average consumer? So if I had to summarize this down to a simple answer, I would just say yes. Would the industry be doomed without Rolex? No, but no question, Rolex is crucial for the health of the industry. And it's almost like this leading metric to what is the general health of the industry in many ways is dictated by Rolex. If Rolex is struggling, generally speaking, a lot of the industry is struggling. That's not always the case, but Rolex does set the tone for the market because that is the first brand, at least from a luxury perspective, that people are going to know and be aware of. Rolex has a huge percentage of market share in the Swiss watch industry. We're talking about close to a third of the Swiss watch industry. And where I'm from in the United States, it's roughly 40% of new watch sales are Rolex. So that is huge in the United States. But Rolex is a phenomenon and it has transcended the category of watches. They are dominant in the world of pre-owned and they drive much of what is happening there. They're also a gateway for luxury watches in general for so many people. Many people wouldn't stumble on some of these other luxury watches or even independent brands if they didn't start with Rolex. Now, that's not always the case, but you always need that entry door. You need those brands that are going to be leading the charge to improve the general idea and broader landscape. Like, not a direct comparison, but think about like music as an example. If you think of the whole grunge era, If you didn't have Kurt Cobain, you didn't have Lane Staley, Chris Cornell, Eddie Vedder, like, would grunge have taken off the same way? You need those big names in ways that you can get people in. Look at hip hop, same way. You have Nas, you have NWA, Mobb Deep, Pac, and Biggie. Like, these are the way that you were driving forward. Metal, Metallica, Iron Maiden. You almost need those feeder artists and brands in the same way you need feeder brands to be able to push a whole concept forward of watch collecting and an industry forward. So Rolex is so important. Would it totally wreck the industry if Rolex was not involved? I don't think so, but no question you need those top tier brands to excel for the industry to excel. Before we go any further, new Seiko 5 just launched. These watches I think are going to be some of the launches of the year from Seiko. This is the SSK 023 and the SSK 025. Takes the field watch DNA with a GMT, 4R34 movement on the inside, and the prices of these are actually lower than those previous SSK bicolor GMT models. Were just over $400. You have a steel bracelet version as well as this black PVD case version. Both of these look fantastic. They are on our website on teddybaldassarre.com. I can't promise that stock will be ready to go as soon as you head over there because these have been difficult to get our hands on at the early stages and have been selling really well. So definitely act fast. If you want to be notified when these are available again, please do so and we will let you know when they are. Any purchase also supports us and the content, so we'd greatly appreciate it. We know you can buy a watch in a lot of different places nowadays, but it allows us to keep doing what we're doing here. We love what we do. Links will be in the description down below if you're interested in checking these out, but back to the Q&A. Next question asks, what do you think about the big purchase of Universal Geneve by Breitling? More specifically, what do you think would be their first launch pieces? Since it's a must that they will bring some heritage pieces besides their new watches. So I have been kind of waiting to address this. I didn't know when I was going to address this, but this seems like a perfect time to do so, that I had this question brought up. I thought it was a brilliant move, and I can't believe it took this long to happen. For years, Universal Geneve was just owned by this like Hong Kong company, and they really weren't doing anything from a watchmaking standpoint. It was really just put the branding on the dial, and all the designs were, quite frankly, just terrible. And they were such a shell of the former self of Universal Geneve. If you're not familiar with this brand, I would just say, look up vintage Universal Geneve and just tell me that these are not just beautiful watches. Like, they're tri-compacts, the pole router. The pole router was, like, if you're talking about under $5,000, what was one of the most important watches to start kind of this vintage craze in the last 10 years. I would argue that that was one of them leading the charge. But if I had to pick and make a prediction about what would be the first watch that they would roll out, I'd say a pole router. It's a known model. It has some legend and affiliation with its design. It's going to be probably easier to manufacture than some of the other watches in their lineup. In terms of pricing and positioning, because that's going to be an obvious question, if I had to make a prediction there, I would assume that this is going to be more in the $10,000 to $20,000 price range above the typical Breitling offering. If you're thinking about their portfolio, I would see Breitling as that mass market luxury good that hits production numbers but still produces a great product. Then you have this, which is a bit more niche. I wouldn't blow the doors off this. I don't think you should blow the doors off of a Universal Geneve. Make this what it needs to be. It's a beloved brand that nobody was doing anything with for years and years, but it has this archive that you could argue is better than a lot of current living brands that have been around for decades and been producing watches for a long time without this suspended operation. My mind immediately goes to movements. Like, what are they going to do? Now, Breitling has their own in-house movements, but I think they're going to do some collaborative type of effort to produce something from the ground up. At least that's my hope. I'm hoping that they don't just try to throw something attainable in here that is just off the shelf. I'd like them to have some ability to see the market for what I think people are expecting for this product. People are going to be willing to spend $10,000 to $25,000 on a watch from Universal Geneve. It just has to prove its case why it's going to cost that much. And for that price, you're going to need to figure out what you're going to be doing for a movement. I'd be looking and probably talking to places like Vaucher with some of their micro rotor movements. I don't know if that's possible, and the B2B interaction that these brands have, but that's where my mind goes. I know they've also developed a relationship with Concepto, I believe, for some of their chronograph movements in kind of collaboration with. So if that's something that they want to pursue, I think you take your time, do it right. But that's the most important thing thing with this. If they do it right, this could be a huge success and one of the greatest revival stories in recent times in watchmaking. Next question asks, have you considered a bit of a deep dive into microbrands or less known brands in general? I just wanted to address this because I saw this question on here and I just wanted to say this, that I am all about covering smaller brands, and I thought I have covered a lot of smaller brands. Typically when I cover smaller brands, I do it more in a listicle format or more of a premium piece of content format, just because I think that allows it to differentiate than just a traditional review. But if I have to be very blunt and honest, it's hard sometimes to rationalize covering a smaller brand. And that pains me because I like giving support and supporting smaller makers that are doing some great things. But the challenge for me is also balancing what everybody wants to see and what majority of people want to see. There's a lot of times people say, I want to see microbrand content, but then you cover a smaller brand and then nobody watches it. So I have to find this balance with everything that I'm doing, given that if I don't hit a certain viewership number, I mean, that hurts me, it hurts the business, it hurts, what we're doing here. I mean, YouTube doesn't like when you post videos that don't get a lot of views. That's how you get in the algorithm. That's how you get recommendation. Like, I always have to keep that in the back of my mind. So I'm balancing it out. But I've done a lot of this. I mean, this is stuff that I've done in the past. I mean, you can go on my channel and look at, reviews of Anordain watches, Baltic, Formex, Manta, Brew, Braska. This is just naming a few here. And then I also have like a ton of listicle content. I would do like these yearly wrap-ups of micro brands. And then independent brands is a whole different story. I mean, FP Journe, Resins, MB&F, Moritz Grossman, RGM. I've visited their facility. Same with MB&F. Louis Erard, Moser, Vulcane, Christopher Ward. I mean, I've done a lot of this. It's just hard to cover these watches as much as you cover larger brands, because that's where the interest is. That's where people are mostly making their buying decisions on. So that's usually what people want to see the most of. But I always try to find a balance, and I like to be a channel that is not just always covering the same old, Rolex and the same old watch that everybody's talking about and wants. I mean, I want to cover different products on the channel because that makes it more entertaining for me. I like covering something that's fresh, new, and different. And I think it also makes the channel better, ultimately. But that is the delicate balance of covering different watches and different brands. Next question asks, have you ever thought about starting your own watch company? Simple answer is yes, but it's been hard for me to ever commit to this just because of all the things that I'm doing and how much content I crank out and how much time I have. I have so much respect for people that do this, and being in this industry, you see that you could see the pretenders from the people that really are doing things well. And to design a watch properly and to build a brand, more importantly, designing a watch is one thing. To really build your own brand is a full-time job and endeavor in pursuit. But I've had all these internal thoughts about this, and the longer you wait, the more pressure it almost builds on yourself to want to do the best job you possibly can. So probably not going to do it, but definitely has crossed my mind several times. But that said, I would entertain and have been entertaining some ideas around maybe doing some collaborative type of projects with certain watchmakers that I really respect, or brands that I really respect, to get something out there on a more smaller scale basis that would allow me to still express myself and have some elements of design intertwined, but not really talking about brand building, because that to me is a big commitment and I don't want to half-ass something like that. Next question asks, what do you think about watch brands renaming ETA Sellita movements to make it seem like they're their own? For example, Caliber 5 or Hamilton H10, without any info on their website that it's an SW200 ETA 2824. I mean, Hamilton, I'll give them an out just because that movement is modified to a degree and I think they can get away with it. But in general, I think brands can just be way more transparent about movements, how they're assembled, what part is a Bosch versus not. I mean, this is in their best interest to do it. And even if it is an ETA or Sellita, like, people are smart enough nowadays to have resources available. They can get the full story. So you're not really fooling most buyers of watches. I mean, there's a lot of people that might not know better. It does take a bit of time to navigate this, but I mean, if I see a SW200 or an ETA 2824, like, and see it in a case back, like, I know that's an ETA 2824. Like, a lot of these Bosch movements, you just seen them thousands of times at this point, where you know what you're looking at as you've handled more and more watches. Now that comes with time. So I think it is something that brands just need to be a little bit more transparent about and talking about more. As another example though, on the opposite end, where brands aren't selling themselves enough, because that's also a thing that's happening. You have something like a Mula Glasuto where they just say they're moving as an SW200. Yes, it is using SW200 architecture, but that's a movement that's being disassembled and then also being assembled again with their custom regulator system, their woodpecker regulator neck. Like, that is something that's notable, but they don't really talk about it that much. I think transparency is our friend in this industry. I know brands are very hesitant to want to open up their doors, and that's why I always appreciate when a brand lets myself and our crew come in and shoot a manufacturer, because I come away with more respect for the brand every time. I've never gone to a brand and been like, wow, they're not as great as I thought they were. It's always like, wow, they're doing this here, like this is incredible. And that's from entry-level brands up to very high-end, high horology bespoke pieces. Like, this is my reaction almost every single time, just because watchmaking is so involved and it's such a meticulous process with its fine-tuned testing, even a basic movement. There's a lot that goes into it. I think brands should just start to be very honest about it. And if it is a SW200, that's okay. You don't need to disguise it as something it's not. Just be straightforward and transparent about it. I think that's what we should be pushing forward in the industry more than anything. Next question asks, what do you think the natural jumps in watch collecting typically are? I started with a cheap quartz Seiko, then a Citizen Eco Drive, PRX First Mechanical, and Tudor Black Bay 58. What were your jumps? Now for me, I don't think there is a natural way of progressing and jumping through watch collecting, because it's not a linear journey. It's jumping back and forth. It's maybe a very stable collection journey where you're just figuring out that, hey, this is what I like to collect. I don't need to evolve it in any way. There's no one size fits all when it comes to this world of watch collecting. So I'll just say that first. For me though, where I saw like those jumps happening was, yes, you start with your affordable quartz watch, then you get your first mechanical watch, typically like a Seiko. In many instances, that was like my journey into it. Then you get into other watches, right into that kind of Swiss watchmaking tier, so like a Tissot for an example. So that was a whole big thing for me. But where I really started to feel like, whoa, like this is a jump, was when I started to get over like $1,000, because that was, to me at the time, and still is, like a lot of money. So when you're spending over, 3 zeros on a watch, or over, 4 digits on a watch, like that's an investment. That's a big purchase. And I remember when I first did that, that was like whoa. I felt like kind of something in my stomach, like this is real. This is starting to really ramp up here quickly. But as you go from there, there's just this gradual desensitizing that happens as you go throughout your collecting journey. The next jump for me was getting into really vintage. So I'm not like the traditional route. I was like, all right, how can I get into brands like Rolex and Omega for like $2,000? And back then when I was getting into watches, that was it. You had to go vintage. That was the only way that you could get into those brands. And it's crazy to say that out loud right now. Some of you are probably like, you could do that back then. You could actually, get into an Omega and Rolex for those prices. You still can for some Omega, but like Rolex even, like I remember spending like $2,500 on a Datejust. Like that existed back then. So that was my step. So it wasn't the same journey as I think many people now, but that was that next hurdle. And then you're getting into maybe like that tier, like Omega, Rolex, Breitling. There was also a big thing for me with German watchmaking. I was collecting things like Zinn, Nomos, as well as like Junghans. Like I love those watches. That whole design style spoke to me a lot. What was going on in Germany, and there's just something about it that just spoke to me. But I've been all over the map, and I don't think there's this general path. But I think that first step as you're going through it, just keep feeling comfortable. Don't overstretch. You should never make these jumps uncomfortable. I think that's the most important thing to talk about here. Our next question comes from Garen. He is a watchmaker, so pretty cool. As a collector, how do you go about having your watches serviced? And how important is your relationship with the watchmaker who will do the work? Do you schedule stagger watches? Do you get them serviced early as a preventative measure, or do you wait for performance to dwindle? Always curious to hear collector's perspective. Garen, if you see this video, please leave your recommendation in the comments because you're a watchmaker. But my general take and how I look at it, to answer your question, yes, I do think having a relationship with a watchmaker is important, and I will have even a higher standard depending on the watch. If it is an off-the-shelf movement, I usually will just go through the brand. If I have no timetable, I'm in a fortunate position where yes, I'd miss a watch, but I have a lot of watches in my collection that will keep me busy. So you do have to think about that as you're sending things in. It is a period of time that you have to wait. I mean, certain places right now I know for servicing can take well over 6 months if you're talking about the complexity of a watch as it gets a little higher up. If it's something sentimental or vintage, that is where I'll start to really want to vet out a person, look at their kind of body of work as a watchmaker. What are they familiar with? What is their access to parts? I would be very just blunt and honest with them too about any issues that I think could arise or what I am worried about, what I would want, and I'd want them to be very open and honest with me. And I think that's the important thing if you're dealing with a watchmaker. Like, you want no BS when you're talking with a watchmaker. Similar if you're talking to like a doctor, like I want to hear the blunt truth about my health, and I want to hear the same thing about the watch that I have. If there are going to be issues with it or there are going to be issues with getting parts, I'd like to know that up front. And I think that's a great way to vet out a watchmaker as well, as if they can be honest with you, you see their body of work, and also how easy are they to communicate with and how great are they at giving a sense of a timeline and being transparent about that. The question about being proactive versus reactive when it comes to servicing, if proactive was 100 on a scale and 0 was reactive, I'm probably closer to the reactive side. I am probably more in like the 35 range if reactive is 0 and you're just waiting for the thing to just be dead. So I am slightly slower than proactive, but it also depends on the watch. If it's a watch that is very robust, it uses an Bosch caliber, I will be even farther maybe in that direction because I know that there's nothing catastrophic that could potentially happen if I wait a little bit longer. If it's something that's a little bit higher end and I'm more concerned, I'm also thinking about the timetable, might be a little bit more proactive in that approach. But that's probably where I generally fall on that spectrum of things. And then further, I also like to have a time grapher, like to, dial in on some of my watches in terms of accuracy. I'm not a big stickler for accuracy. I can live with a watch maybe getting a little bit farther off, but look at things like beat air, amplitude, how is the watch health of that movement. I think that's always important to just know as an enthusiast as you start to amass a larger collection. And if you see something that is just off, start to do some investigation for yourself and don't panic. But that's my general approach. Again, Garen, if you have your own take in the comments, please let me see it. So this next question goes a little further on a question that was featured in a previous video. I want a general opinion on how to dress watches that are not on a metal bracelet. So in general, for me and how I look at just wardrobe, watches, like from a style perspective, which is not a huge element of how I think about watches. Like for myself, I usually just put on a watch, and as long as it doesn't clash with my outfit, I don't really give it much further thought than that. But with straps, I think for me, I don't think it's a huge deal when it comes like leather matching. We talked about this in a previous video to your other leather. I try to get it as close as possible. I'm not gonna go out of my way to change a strap always. I probably would just wear a different watch unless I had some event I'm going to and I wanted to switch it out. Like for example, I have a white birch on. I had a black strap that I swapped to and I wore it for my wedding just because I was wearing a black suit for the wedding. So that made sense to me. But how I look at everything is interchangeability. If I can wear denim on this day, I can wear it with another outfit. I have this sweater underneath, I could wear this with another jacket. It's all about having versatility. Most of my watches that I own, I'd say 65%, are watches that I could wear almost with any outfit. They have silver, white, black, blue dials. Like that's 65% of my collection, if not more. But this whole question gets into this concept that I've always talked about, which is anything that you're buying, especially a watch, it has to work for your lifestyle. If you can't reach for that watch all the time and it doesn't match what you're doing and you don't make it easy on yourself to wear that watch all the time, then it's probably not a great watch for you. You need to have something that's gonna fit your lifestyle or have a lane in which it's going to fit in. I know this is a very cerebral way to think about things and people like to just let their, heart make all the decisions when it comes to watch collecting, but I think it's a good balance. I think you have to have both of these thought processes because we're talking a lot of money. And I think about cost per wear. I think about how often I can wear something. And if I can't wear something often, then that is not a watch that I can enjoy. And I want to be able to enjoy my watches. And to enjoy my watches, I need to be able to wear them. So think about what you wear. For myself, brown jackets, I wear blue, navy, black, forest green, burgundy, more like darker tones, no pastel-y colors. So I have watches that also will complement that. So I always have that in the back of my mind. It's not something I consciously am always addressing in my thoughts. It just is part of my formula of how I do things. So think about versatility, think about interchangeability if you're thinking about style, and make it easy on yourself to go grab something. Interchangeability is your friend when it comes to that. Next question asks, any plans for more content like the G-Shock helicopter drop test? So short answer is yes. The challenge is those videos just cost a lot of money. Like that video was 5 figures of an investment to produce. I mean, think about it. We had probably a couple grand in just watches that we were just destroying, throwing out of a helicopter. We had 3 camera operators. We had to rent some gear for the camera operators, had like a whole set of GoPros. We had a helicopter. Thankfully, the person that was flying the helicopter was very cool. He was actually Swiss. He had a Breitling and thought what we were doing was interesting. So we didn't have to, spend the typical money to rent out a helicopter for a day. So that was good. So that was best case scenario. But then you also have editing time, pre-production time. Like to coordinate a shoot like that takes hours and hours to plan. Then post-production. Most videos that we edit on this channel going to take 8 to 20 hours, depending on complexity. Like video like that, more like 20 to 40 hours. And constant revisions going back and forth with an editor. So it's a lot. I mean, these are big investments to do videos like that. Like I didn't have Casio sending me those watches. I bought those watches because I just want to be able to all right, I don't want to explain to them we're going to drop G-Shocks out of a helicopter. I just want to do it. Let's go. It's a crazy thing to say out loud, but that was the whole mentality behind it. I want to just make it happen. But there is this balance of you have to make it worth your while. I like doing things like that, but running a business here, and it has to make some financial sense. Like, did I make my money back on that? No way. I don't think I did, but it was cool to do. So that's the challenge with a lot of content on this channel. You do a video where you're just talking to camera and we'll get 5 times more views than a video that took, say, 20 times more time to actually execute it and get it finished and uploaded. Not to say it's totally deflating, but it is hard to rationalize when you're investing that amount of time and money in things. But that said, I do think it's important to make those levels of investments because I think we should just produce great content, whether it's those manufacturer visits, videos like that. It's important for me to always kind of keep pushing. I don't always want to just be here talking to a camera because I can do that whenever. I think there's a lot of other people that can do that very well too. That is where we can really differentiate, and I think we can make this channel different. But all right, guys, that's all we have for this video. Thank you, everybody that submitted some questions. We can definitely do more of these in the future. Be sure to be following along on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all those different places, as well as being subscribed here. So when we do ask for questions, you can go ahead and submit yours. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Be sure to subscribe as well. We're getting really close to 1 million subscribers, so really would appreciate any help in getting us there. Also check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.